Hi, welcome to Continuing Conversation with Sadie, the podcast where we explore the heart of care through emotionally intelligent dialogue and sector shifting stories. I'm your host, Sadie Ravening, and I'm really glad you're here. Today, we're stepping into a conversation about the future of home care and what it looks like when leadership is rooted in clarity, courage, and genuine human connection. My guest, Amrit Dhaliwal. Sorry, how do you say your surname?
Dhaliwal. Dhaliwal.
I do apologise.
No worries.
Founder and CEO of author of Time to Thrive, The Home Care Revolution, and widely known as the Walking CEO. Amrit is on a mission to redefine home care in the UK through his active, embodied approach to leadership. His Walking with Woolfinch podcast and his new book, he's opening up powerful conversations about what home care can and should be. He's also a recognised industry voice, speaking at major franchises and care events, excuse me, across the country. And what I appreciate most is the integrity and intention behind his work. Amrit, welcome. It's great to have you here today. It's amazing to have you here. Thank you. We're going to start off with origins, leadership, and personal drive to get a bit more of a background before we get into even more questions. So, my first question to you today is what first inspired you to step into the world of home care, and how did that early experience shape the leader you've become today?
It's a lovely question, Sadie. So I actually got into home care in 2012 and as a franchisee, not a Woolfinch of a different brand. And I at that time my then girlfriend, my now wife, sort of recommended domiciliary care to me and said, "Hey, look, have you thought about this?" And
Yes.
I was like, What on earth is domiciliary care?"
Yes.
Next thing you know, I've sort of bought a home care franchise, and frankly, it was a little bit by accident. I
Yeah.
bought it thinking, well, I'm sure this will be an interesting thing, and let's just see how it goes. But actually, what ended up happening was almost immediately. So I signed the agreement in September of 2012. We got the
Oh,
CQ
wow.
registration in November, and then I got my first care package in sort of February or March the following year. And so
Yeah.
what I then realized was that almost immediately that both home care and franchising were archaic. And I thought this
Yes.
is the real mission. And so
Yeah.
I then decided to go on and uh, essentially build that business up, sell it,
Yeah.
and start my own home care franchising operation. So, and
Yeah.
hence why I founded Woolfinch,
Yeah.
which was, I think we are about sort of 5 or 6 years in now, with a national presence and really looking at what impact we can make on the home care market and how we can change the way we think about aging in the UK.
That's brilliant, and that's very aligned with everything I do because I'm a private carer. I'm PCN lead for Gloucestershire. I've done domiciliary care most of my career, um, and I completely understand everything you're saying. And it's if you can provide excellent home care, it is the way forward because most people would like to be at home if they can. There are other options just as good, but it's about giving people choice, good choices. So I think that's fab. You're known for your active, embodied approach to leadership. The walking CEO is what we call you. What does that represent for you on a deeper level?
I think there's so many things there. I think we talk about movement at Woolfinch,
Yes.
and if we're having a leadership meeting, we'll hop up and do some movement snacks, which are just some stretches and so on throughout, and keeps everyone awake and live and kicking. But also, we have Thrive clubs around the country, which are sort of free clubs that older people can go to. to kind of keep them physically engaged, mentally engaged, and help them with loneliness.
That's a
And
really important point.
and I think
Yeah.
really from my side, I think, well, okay, gosh, we've got to embody that. It's not good enough just to say, it's time to thrive. Is our rally cry, and it's just not good enough to say that that is it. What does that actually mean on a deeper level? How do we do that to ourselves, both in a day-to-day operation, but from a senior leadership piece, but and how do we filter that all the way down and across the whole service? So I'm big advocate of just living it. If you expect people around you to work hard, are you doing that? If you expect the that kind of movement to be a piece, are we doing that? And so on.
You're known for your active, embodied approach to leadership. The walking CEO is what we call you. What does that represent for you on a deeper level?
Yeah, I think you know it's a really interesting question. That from my perspective, I really think about things from yeah, how do we cascade this across the whole business, all the way from carers all the way down to as the senior leadership team and myself. And I think really thinking, well, okay, actually, are we rolling this out across the whole network? And if I, as a leader, saying, well, okay, great, we activities a piece, walking meetings and walking podcasts and stretches
Yeah.
in team meetings and so on. Yeah, all of those things, it starts to contextualize our concept of time to thrive, and it starts to contextualize the whole purpose of saying, well, actually, we've
Yeah.
got older people working with us. Let's keep them active. Let's help build their muscle mass and so on.
Yes. Yeah. So really, we're talking about keeping people moving, aren't we? So that they can have a
Correct.
good
Yes.
quality of life for them.
Yes.
Yeah. No,
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
makes really, that makes a lot of sense. When you look back at the early days of Woolfinch, what values or principles guided your decisions?
So yeah, years ago I read this wonderful book by a gentleman called Gino Wickman, and the book's called Traction. And one of the things that I found super interesting in it was the way that he recommended kind of coming up with a written down value set, where it's not just a business owner that says, here it is. It's really kind of engaging with all of the senior leadership team, the people that work with you, and so on, to say, great, here we go, right? Let's put this whole thing together. And it was a really interesting piece, thinking about, well, what's important to me at that time, and what's important to the team that I had at that time, and really thinking about that kind of the entrepreneur behind the business. I think was a really important piece for me to say, well, actually, can anyone from a different sector get in to home care and build a successful service? And then also really looking at it from the actual care provision side, to say, well, actually, you know are we moving out of this very archaic way of living within the home care space and filing cabinets, wall to wall, and are we going paperless? Are we slicing and dicing data and so on? And so for me, those were the really things that really drove me at that time, to then say, well, actually, what does that mean on a practical day-to-day basis?
Yeah, no, that's great. And we talk a lot in series one about values, core values and beliefs and how it shapes what we do. So that comes in nicely with previous episodes that I've done, and brings us into this one, which is series three, which is at another level. So that's great. As your role has grown nationally, what keeps you grounded and connected to the why behind your work?
I think you've got to stay in the action, Sadie.
Yeah.
So I'm quite actively out and about. Basically, I think it's quite easy as a business owner to just stay in your ivory tower. Actually, because
Yes,
other people are doing the real
I
work,
agree.
and so I think me. hitting the road with my team and saying, hey, what does
Yeah.
a franchisee meeting look like? What are we doing and the events that we're doing? And I sit there with care workers, and I had a wonderful conversation on the care show the other day where a care worker approached me and said, hey, I want some advice on my career. And we sort of sat down, had a sandwich, dug into it. And I think really kind of staying near the people.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're the walking CEO. So that's exactly what you're doing, which is great.
Yeah.
You're not just saying it, you're doing it. And that only gives you more respect, which is great. We're going to go into section two, which is more about the future of home care and human-centered innovation, which really interests me. So hopefully my listeners too. Um, Being a home care worker myself, my first question to you is: you've spoken a lot about redefining home care in the UK, and you've touched on it a bit with us today as well. What does a truly modern human-centered home care model look like to you?
Yeah, what I'd love to us to get to is for us to be more of a one-stop shop. And I think in the next 10 years in home care, I think that's achievable where we're using
Okay.
technology to say, well, okay,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones doesn't need to have a separate appointment with the doctor, a separate appointment with the, physio and pharmacy and so on. We're able to loop all of that. We're able to look at the data, her health data, and say, well, Mrs. Jones is about to have a fall. Can we prevent it?
Yeah.
There's
Prevention's a big
this,
one.
yeah, really, and then putting her at the center of it so that actually she's spending more time with the people and less time with
Mm.
just someone filling out a document to say, well, this is what I did today, and so on. So I think, more contact time and also less people involved in that
Yeah.
situation where you're able to then spin that data out and say, well, can I not send it
Yeah.
directly to the GP, have that meeting, have things go on, and
Mm.
the GP then changes the medication accordingly based on the information that we've now got at hand, and how do we look at that from with the technology that
Yeah.
we've got available to us at the moment. So I think for me, I think it's really kind of making a completely different way of operating.
Yeah.
It's not just
It's a new
task
model. Yeah.
focused; it's outcome focused.
Yes. Yes. I love that because that's definitely what we are achieving within the professional carers network. Um, we have our own model of care which works really well, and also something I think you were talking about is continuity of care and clarity and having less people involved in the process so it's cleaner and clearer, which is compassion. So I think that's great, and not being scared of technology, using it to help us, not get in the way of good home care. Um, what are the biggest misconceptions you see about home care, either from the public, professionals, or policymakers? I'd love to hear your opinion on this.
Well, I think we're a total misconception start to finish, aren't we? It's
Yeah.
we're not as important as the NHS. We are just
Yes,
care workers. We are,
yes,
the whole piece of it. We cannot do more serious types of care. When it gets
yes,
serious, you need to go to a care home or a hospital. A nurse needs to get involved.
yeah,
I think we're the living embodiment of a misconception.
yeah, thank you for sharing that because a lot of us are out there going, hang on a minute, we are professionals. We're not just bum wipers. And the key word there is professional. And someone as established and as well respected as you is even saying that as well.
I
There's a
tell you
lot
something,
more
Sadie.
to us.
I couldn't do the job, right? I if you and I we're organizing a shift for me actually in over the summer, and I'm totally bricking it because I'm like, this is serious work, right? Actually, like it's all good and well coming onto a podcast and talking to lovely people like yourself, but
Yeah.
actually doing the
Oh,
work,
thank
gosh,
you.
that's the real stuff, right? That's really
Yeah.
tough. It's emotional.
It is tough.
It's
Yeah.
really just that's the real work actually. And
Yeah.
so
Thank
I
you.
think we forget about that, and it becomes people on a spreadsheet and so on, it's just not that. We're
No,
talking about
no.
humans, right? We're talking about the humanity
Human
behind the whole
side of
thing.
care.
Yeah.
Yes. And carers at any level, this is coming from you to everybody else out there who cares for a loved one, is a carer, paid, unpaid, to say you are bloody amazing because you're supporting us on that, aren't you? Thank you. That was really, really good. I just want to know, how do you balance innovation with the emotional realities of care, the relationships, the trust, the vulnerability? So again,
So
bringing
it's a really lovely
technology.
question. I think it's about understanding why you are using technology. So,
Yes.
I was hosting the tech theater at the Care Show the other day, and there were loads of conversation about this and AI and all of that. And I think the temptation is to run after shiny things and do things because there's a buzzword going around. But I think the reality is, how does it help me? How does it help me? How does it help my team? How does it help my end user? And do I
Yeah.
understand that? Because actually, if I don't understand that, then why am I bothering? Is it saving admin time for my team so they can spend more time, with contact time? Is it helping an outcome with Mrs. Jones because actually Miss Jones's medication can get to her faster, better, safer, with less mistakes because of X, and so on. It's really understanding the why behind what you're doing, and then yeah, absolutely. And because if you don't understand that, then you're just doing it for the sake of it, and that's where you've got the problem. And then I think when we're talking about the value sets, then really understanding why are you making decisions, and does it go back to the base level values of why you are doing the whole thing in the first place?
That's brilliant. And I would also invite my viewers, based on what you've just said, as the expert here today, to go back to series one, where I talked to Dr. Tomlinson, and he talks a lot about your embedded why. So if you want to understand what that means and how you can apply it, just revisit series one, because he expands on what you've just said even more to help us all understand what to do and best ways forward. So that's great. It really flows. What changes do you believe would make the most meaningful difference for families receiving care at home?
You know, there's so many things that could happen, and I think that one of the most important issues that we have within the sector is how funding flows, and if that changed to be freer, simpler, and more, because I don't think that what the funding that is available is actually enough to cover base level care, frankly. And I'm
Yeah,
talking about hourly rates and so on.
I think
So
that's right.
if
Yeah.
from my perspective, if you fix that, then everything else can get fixed. It will attract the right type of investment within the sector. It will mean that families can make better quality decisions. It will give them more choice. And it will mean that we're able to sensibly remunerate our care workers, which I think is actually really quite a hard thing to do, given the
Mm,
poor rates that you'll find around local
yeah.
authorities around the country.
Well, I think as on top of everything you just said, which is spot on, I personally think is spot on and fantastic. And I will just throw in there that I know um, a very profound online presence comes from the Home Care Association, who very clearly explain the lack of funding and how poorly carers are paid. Backing up what you said,
Yeah, yeah.
the other side
And
of
when you
it
look
as
at
well
when you
is
think
that,
about their fair pay sort of
yeah,
arrangement, you think, well, what should a home care agency be charging? You're really in the kind of mid 30s per hour, but local authorities around the country are kind of nowhere near that on average.
no, no, they're not. And also, when in one of our earlier questions, we were talking about home carers being professionals. Well, if you pay them that much, they don't feel professional. and that comes into it as well. So th- that's a really important point, and it's about benefiting everybody, isn't it? As we go into section three, which is about leadership, well-being, and sustainable impact, I just wanted to know about how you lead a national organization, write, speak, and host a podcast, all whilst championing well-being. What does sustainable leadership look like for you day to day?
Gosh, it sounds quite tiring when you say it, doesn't it,
Yeah,
Sadie?
you do it a
um,
lot. A working CEO.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the you've really got to have passion in what you do.
Mm,
I'm really a big believer in that. I
mm,
think that if you love what you do, it doesn't
yeah.
feel like work.
Mm,
And I suppose the other part of it for me is that I'm really trying to create some change and almost a movement within the care sector. So that really kind of
mm,
drives me, drives the franchisees, the wonderful franchisees that we've got at Woolfinch.
yeah.
And finally, I think it's really just thinking about time chunking and really looking at your diary and
Yeah, I
breaking
like
that
that.
down into,
Time chunking.
15, 30-minute segments, whatever it might be, and really thinking, well, okay, what am I trying to achieve here?
Mm, absolutely. I love that. I'm going to remember that. Time chunking. I like that. Can you share a moment when you realized you needed to shift your approach to protect your energy or your charity?
So I think over time that has happened to me on a number of occasions. I have often found myself in a situation where I think, gosh, I'm too involved in something. And
Mm,
and then inevitably what that means is either I need to create better systems on a
yeah.
certain part of my life or get more people or different people. And what I've got good at over time, and it really has taken me a long time, is getting the right people in the right seats so that I can then keep my energy reserved, because I think that's really, as a business owner and as a leader, that's really all you have.
Yeah. And it takes us back to series one when we talk about boundaries. That
Yes, yeah,
popped into my head when you were talking. I think um, even though we don't know each other really well, I think we do have some things in common here. So,
yeah.
yeah, I do understand where you're coming from. And you've got to sustain yourself so you can help others, haven't you? What practices help you stay emotionally resourced whilst leading in a sector that can be demanding and unpredictable, Amrit?
So I think running a business, and certainly a business within the home care sector, is exactly that on a daily basis,
Yeah,
and there is no 2 days that look the same. And
yeah,
I think really, actually, that's the thing to get good at.
yes,
It's really understanding that tomorrow's a new day. Whatever the stresses and pressures are of today, it's about kind of being able to keep on recycling, moving forward, and saying, well, actually, how do I keep pivoting? How do I keep
yeah,
waking up and keep going? And I think for me, I think that's half of the job actually
yeah,
for care providers overall, because it's emotional, right?
yes, yeah. And that's why I'm asking these sort of questions because it is about emotional intelligence, leadership. Um, and yeah, absolutely brilliant. I've got nothing to add to that because that's exactly what I would think.
Uh,
How do you maintain boundaries while still being accessible, supportive, and present for your teams and partners?
I think fundamentally it's understanding friendly, not friends, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
understanding that actually there's got to be clear boundaries. When I started, I was available all the time, and that
yeah.
meant I wasn't available for my family and so on. And so actually it's closing that down, saying, well, actually,
Mm.
if there is a huge emergency, great, I'm there. But if it's that, you know, the font is wrong on this leaflet, well, that can probably wait till Monday.
Yeah.
and it's kind of understanding where do I hop in and where do I
Yeah.
hop out, and also helping your team understand that as well. Because I think as a leader, you have a responsibility to set and create boundaries because what
Mhm.
you do is what sets the norm for the whole business.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very. I'm just going to broach on this a little bit because I think now we've got technology in the picture. It's a way of life, and it's going to just increase, and it can be a positive, but it can also be a negative here because I think as leaders. We all understand that we could be on our laptop till 11 or 12 and just not shut down. And again, I think that broaches on what you've just said about boundaries. And actually, I remember something Mark Top said in series one about if you're on a computer or a laptop and you're in the lounge and the battery's gone dead, actually, that's a big sign you need to stop.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah. That's a good
little
point.
things that because we're talking about now in series two. So I'm just looking for some really good practical little tips or snippets that we could use to sort of help all of us to just know when to put the work
I think
down.
the thing with care is that the work never ends, and
It
so
doesn't. Yeah. This is
you know,
why this is important to talk
yeah.
about.
I think for me, it's really having a clear scorecard for your week and saying, well, what does my week look like? How do I know if I'm successful? What does that mean? Is that,
Mhm.
what is the activity that I need to do? And
Yeah.
and actually focusing on that because there's so many things that it can become white noise. But it's really then
Yes.
spinning that back and saying, actually, here are the 6 things I need to do this week. And outside of that, everything else can wait. Also having a really clear agenda for your day.
Yeah.
I think, really, and working hard on that because that might take you 6 months to steady. And then you start realizing, well, where are the fires in my day to day life or organization? What do I need?
Yeah.
And a simple story for me years ago was that Sunday evenings were a disaster. And why were they a disaster? Because I'm trying to get through a weekend. I'm trying to like relax.
Yeah.
By Sunday evening, that kind of happens, and then I'm like, oh God, now I've got 5 shirts to iron, and then I found a local.
That's my story, Amrit.
Yeah, well, this is it. But I found a local dry cleaner who, we sort of I became
Outsourcing
friendly
is
with
the
it.
future.
Well, this is it, and I sort of became friendly with him, and he said, "Look, I tell you what, for £7.50, I will do all 5 shirts every week." And I thought, well, okay, and actually, it was then it was transformative, and this is I don't know, must be 10, 15
Yeah.
years ago now, but it just kind of got me thinking about, well, what else can I automate in my life,
Yeah.
and the things that I don't want to do over time, can I not do them?
Yeah.
Frankly,
Right.
and
No,
spend my
that's
time on the places that are important, be that family, my team, the
yeah.
face to face, whatever it might be. Here,
That's great, and that's a great way to end that section because we're time chunking for sustainable impact because we're talking about how to keep it going for the long term. I must get that number off you for the ironing. Okay, section four: time to thrive and the home care revolution. So I can't think of anyone else better to help me answer these questions. Your new book, Time to Thrive, Amrit, The Home Care Revolution, is already sparking big conversations. What inspired you to write it?
what I found was that there was nothing that was bite size and available to people that are not from the sector. And thinking
Mm,
about my
good
history,
point.
when I came into the sector in 2012, actually, this book was written for that Amrit. Thinking, well, here you go. Here is the sector, or as it stands,
Yeah,
and things that we can do. And some of them are super simple, frankly. But it's just, well, are we doing them? And have they been set out for somebody that's not from the industry?
yeah, perfect. And I love the way you said that you've made it bite sized. because you're not assuming that everybody knows what's simple to you is
Yeah.
simple to them.
Yeah. Truly.
Um,
Yes. Yeah.
and again, when we go into series three, we're looking at the outside in. So it's another way of looking through this. You all, to me, every guest on this podcast is like a little bit of special glass on a kaleidoscope, adding a little bit of story to each one, and then eventually it'll all come together. So you've all got such amazing advice to give all of us that it all matters. It's really nice. What message or shift do you hope the book brings to the sector, both for leaders and for families? Because I think both are just as important when it comes to care.
I think one of my big aspirations is to help rebrand the care sector
Mm,
because we really I think
I
we have
agree with
we
that.
have a branding issue, frankly,
Yeah,
and my hope is that in a small way this book helps to do that,
yeah.
as my
It's
podcast
another
Walking,
little nudge.
and that's it. It's kind of taking us in that right direction, I hope.
Yeah, I think it
And
is.
that is my aspiration for everyone to really start
Mm,
looking at the sector, thinking about it slightly differently.
mm. I totally agree, and I would I would add to that, say, because I'm a home care worker, I've got my own home care business, and I go out and do the work myself every day. And I want us to start being called personal carers, personal care assistants or
Mhm,
PAs, because we are doing so much more than just home help, which is what it
mhm.
started out as in the 50s. Um, and again, it's when you want to rebrand the sector, I think you have to look at people's roles and what they're doing now, not what they were doing when it started, in the war and things like that. So
Yeah, yeah.
I think your book really helps us to understand that because you're looking at the sector with such a good, what I call bird's eye view, rather than being lost in all the details, that it really helps people to understand that.
Mm.
Through your Walking with Woolfinch podcast, I mean, what haven't you done in this? You've had powerful conversations with people across the sector. What themes or insights have stayed with you the most? Mm.
Um, that's so interesting, that question. I think there's so many different things, and I think i- for me, I think the bit that I'm really interested in actually is about how technology will support change within our sector. And I'm not
Yeah.
necessarily even talking about AI and all that kind of stuff. I'm just talking about simple technology and that might be technology in helping us deliver a survey, but it's really sort of saying, well, how do we start to actually use technology in a much more robust way on a ground level? So I'm not talking about the big corporates. I'm talking about
Mm,
someone that has a 500 hours a week business. How do they use tech to kind of help create a better quality service and
mm.
systemize the whole thing?
Yeah. And you said there's so many. Could you give us like two or three more that just
Yeah,
pop in your
sure.
mind just to,
And
you know,
so I think one of the other things, I think there was a lovely gentleman that was talking about the creative world, and that
yeah,
often sits with
you've
me
got me
in
now.
thinking, well, how the creative world can kind of impact
Yeah.
boring businesses. And I think home care absolutely is segmented in that. And I
Mm,
think really thinking about how we can break it and start again from the kind of creativity piece, I think is super, super interesting. I think also one of the other things
definitely.
that yeah, I mean, one of the other things that I think about is systemization. And so
Yeah.
when I was out in the States filming, I was talking to a lot of franchisors, and actually in the States, I think they're very good at delivering that kind of franchising product essentially
Mm,
to franchisees and families and carers and everyone. And
right.
actually, what I found was really thinking about how you systemize everything, how you
Mm,
systemize a meeting with a family, how, am I running the same format essentially over and over again, which means that I can then train the next person to deliver the meeting in the same way that I would deliver the meeting. And, so I can create
Oh,
a
yeah.
world-class service every single time. And I
Yeah.
think that kind of repetition, creating that culture
Yeah.
of excellence, I think is something that you create through systemization.
Good point. And you're already saying that that's quite dominant in America.
Truly, yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Also, I would also say that creative care, it was a podcast that came out last Sunday. One of my very close to my heart conversations is very dominant in America. And there was two ladies I talked to um in series two, I believe. It's my first try conversation.
Yeah.
And they are the first two in the UK to lead a creative care project using drama. And
Oh,
that is
wow.
very interesting to watch because what
Yeah,
we bring out in people with dementia,
yeah,
um, people who have special needs or disabilities, using drama and volunteers and non-profit systems
yeah.
is phenomenal, and it's all over America.
Yes, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and it's
How
these two
interesting.
ladies. It's called the Cutting Edge Theatre. They're amazing. They don't even realize that they're on the forefront of something big. So
Amazing.
yeah, again, systems and looking at creative ways to change things. That's social care in a nutshell, isn't it?
Truly, yeah.
And you know all this because your book is just amazing. Really colors all this in for us. Looking
Mhm.
ahead, what excites you about the future of home care, Amrit? And how do you plan to protect your energy as you lead into that future?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think that from my perspective, I think home care is absolutely the place to be in 2026. I think, I often talk about how in the 90s we had the dot-com sort of era. In the noughties it was social media, and I think in the 20s it is very much home care,
Yeah,
and this is the place to be. So I'm very optimistic about the market. I think that
I am.
we're kind of sitting on a tremendous amount of change. But yeah, I mean, I'm very excited about where we are and where we sit right now. So that for me, I think overall is kind of where my mind is at, and I think that
Yeah,
we are
me
really
too.
in
Yeah,
a set
we're
place.
definitely aligned there, Amrit. Yeah. And I'm very passionate about bespoke, high quality home care
Mm,
as well.
mm,
Because I have been made aware recently of how saturated the market is.
yeah.
Um, but actually, something I know that's true, if you're very good at what you do, you'll always be in work,
Yes. Yeah.
which is true,
Yeah.
isn't it?
It's very true, I think. So
So, how, Amrit, just to go on to the second part of that question, how do you plan to protect your energy as you lead into that future?
I think fundamentally surrounding myself with the right people.
Mm,
And
good.
if I can surround
Yeah,
myself with the right people, my energy is protected because they are really
you're
delivering.
aligned. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
a
it's
great answer. I love that. And that's where we're going to wrap it up today. I just want to thank you for joining us for the episode of Continuing the Conversation with Sadie, where we explore the heart of care through emotionally intelligent dialogue and sector shifting stories. Today's conversation with Amrit. Can you say your surname again? I'm not going to try.
Dhaliwal.
Thank you. Reminded us that the future of home care isn't just about innovation or growth, it's about integrity, clarity, and the courage to lead with humanity. Amrit's work shows what becomes possible when leaders stay connected to their values whilst shaping something new. We explored what modern home care could look like, how well-being sustains leadership, and why embodied intentional practice matters more than ever before. His book, Time to Thrive, see the link below, and his Walking with Woolfinch podcast invites us to rethink what care can be, not just for those receiving it, but for those delivering it. So as we close, I invite you to reflect. What boundary might you honour this week? What part of your practice needs softening and what needs strengthening? Thank you for listening and thank you for continuing the conversation with Sadie. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself and each other and keep reflecting, keep growing and keep caring. Thank you, Amrit.
Thank you, Sadie.